So today I'm going to show you guys how to expose your cyanotypes using the sun. So I have my paper and I've had it stored after it dried and after I coated it, of course. I put it in a black trash bag and I put that trash bag in a box because it was not in a light safe place. I mean that kept it safe. It kept it from being exposed from any light that was bouncing around. It was plenty of darkness to keep it from being exposed. And then what I was doing is I pull out each piece individually, keep the others, in the bag, because the minute they get taken out, they start being exposed. The sun is bouncing around everywhere. The first image I put down is a transparency that I made from a photo negative of my daughter. And the photo negatives do need to be made using toner also. So you would need to, take an image and take it to FedEx or Office Max or somewhere and ask them to print it onto a sheet of film, a transparent sheet. Because it's the toner that blocks the sun. An inkjet print on that kind of paper would just beat up, and you'll see it wouldn't work. So another thing with cyanotypes is that you can use objects on your paper to get a very interesting type of exposure. And to do that, you just actually place the object on top of the paper. And if it is opaque, it will keep the sun from hitting it. But an interesting thing happens with objects. They have gradients because, the object isn't flat. So the skeleton, for example, will have gradients of exposure, and so will the skeleton arm. In this one, I'm taking this baby that had its stuffing removed, and I'm going to use that baby doll. And I think its arms were separated from its body, so I decided to put those on as well. One of my daughter's experiments with her dolls. But they work really, really well. Objects do for this type of work. So you can see they're sitting there. Now, it only took me about, I want to say 5 or 6 minutes to lay out, maybe 8 minutes to lay out all of these different elements for each piece of paper. This one is a film positive with text, and I'm also putting, leaves. There's a little picture that's a film positive. That's one of those liney, high contrast images. And when you're using something on film, it's very good to have a contact printer. That's just a piece of glass on a drawing board, really. Like they're just held under the clips at the top. And that, when the glass is pressed against the cyanotype with the transparency, the film positive pressed up against it, that will make a clearer print. So it's important to weight the glass down. I'm using clips. I will clip it down on the bottom end after I finish putting in some other objects. But I put in things that can be smashed, like leaves and flat flowers, and things like that to work and make the image more interesting. Because it's not very interesting if it's just all blue, it's not. So see here, I'm clipping the bottom portion. And so I'm continuing to pull out objects, and you can see me place them onto the paper, because the objects obviously cannot be put under glass. So this is a doll, and I moved it around, but again, it starts to expose immediately, and you can see it in the paper. Another important thing to think about when you're working with the sun. So we were filming this, and it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you need to have your shadow behind you when you're doing this process. Had I been on the other side, I would have cast a shadow on my cyanotypes, and that would have messed with the exposure. So you want to keep your shadow out of the way, and try to place things that will stay put. That's very important. And, think about the arrangement before you go out, because when you do place them, you just don't have a lot of time. And granted, I'm doing 8 pieces at one time, so I have to be fast. But if you do one at a time, you can think about it more. But I kind of like the spontaneity of surrounding myself with a bunch of things I'd like to, try, and then seeing if I can do it. So this is the last piece. I put the scissors on there and branch with some leaves on it and some other things. And then I think I went and picked up a few more objects. See, my shadow's getting in the way, but I just try not to keep it there for any long period of time, because that will affect the exposure. So now it's just waiting. So what I did at that point was I set a timer for about 10 more minutes, and then I put on a few more little branches on some of the pieces, but really it was just a matter of waiting at that point. So there were some that looked done. They had turned a purpley brown color as opposed to the blue, and so I got a water bath and started my rinsing process. So that is just plain water in a tray, and what I'm doing is just rinsing off all the chemical that comes off when you're exposing. So you can see that the images are starting to develop and starting to come up, and I needed to continue rinsing them because it actually takes a little while to rinse. Strangely enough, it takes a little longer than you might think. And you can see the water is green with the cyanotype chemical. And so as I'm doing this process, I clean the water. I add more water to the water with a hose. And right now I've picked up a bottle of hydrogen peroxide, and you can see how it deepens that blue significantly. It apparently speeds up the process, but it also darkens the blue. Now when it dries, it won't be that dark. It looks really beautiful in the water, and then it always dries a little bit lighter. But it's always such a cool effect to see that change. It's so dramatic. So you can see there's the skeleton, the baby skeleton, and I'm taking that out. And I put that original doll in there in the hydrogen peroxide bath, so it's being darkened also. When you're doing the rinsing process, you do need to move quite quickly because, I had 8 sheets that I was doing at one time. So I tried to do them in the order that I first put them down, so I wouldn't have any that become overexposed, because if you leave them out for too long, they will become overexposed. So the time that I, used for exposure with the sun on that kind of a bright day was about, I want to say, 12 to 13 minutes, maybe 15 at the most. All in all, I think, and that was a very good exposure time. So it's going to vary depending upon the brightness of the sun, but like as we discussed in class, you can even do this on a cloudy day. Apparently, you just need to leave them out for longer. There is UV light bouncing around even on a cloudy day. So it's a really fun process. Do remember, as you're doing this and as you're rinsing the paper, I'm being a little rough with my paper, and I actually tore one of the sheets, which was kind of a bummer, and I'm going to repair it from the back side, after it dries. But the paper is not made to, you probably want to let it soak for maybe 15 minutes maximum, because it's not made like it used to be, actually. So it used to be much sturdier, and I used to soak paper for hours and hours. I'm not sure what the difference is, but it's just not, it's not made the way it used to be made. So here you can see I'm just very thoroughly rinsing. And I'm continuing to rinse. So the rinsing process does take a little while.